ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandot pranams. Please accept my humble obeisances. Please give me a second to set myself up. Okay, this is working. Hare Krishna. Sorry, it's easier with my hands free. Okay. Hare Krishna Mataji's Dandot pranams. Firstly, I want to thank Malini Sundari Mataji for always giving me opportunities like this. When she first asked me to speak, I was very much against it. I still don't know if this is a great idea because these topics are very esoteric and a little challenging for me in my current stage of spiritual life. But praying to all of you who have kindly assembled here to empower my speech and my thoughts in some way that I can serve you all and please the acharyas with this attempt. So that in mind, I'm going to try and speak a few words about this very beautiful pastime which takes place in Vrindavan as part of Krishna's childhood pastimes. So the specific story of Vatsasura is part of a larger setting where we hear of Krishna and his cowherd family moving to Vrindavan from Gokula. We'll discuss that first. In the Krishna book, this chapter is chapter 11, and it starts with the aftermath of the killing of, not the killing, I'm sorry, after the liberation of Nalakuvara and Manigriva, rather the collapse of the twin Arjuna trees. Right after that, the cowherds are very bewildered and surprised, and they're worried also about how so many demons keep repeatedly attacking Vrindavan, Gokula, and there is a lot of risk for the small children and the cows. So with that in mind, headed by Upananda, they have a conference where they decide that they must choose to move out of Gokul to a more peaceful and a very beautiful place, which is Vrindavan. So after this decision is made, almost immediately everything is arranged and all the paraphernalia is moved in carts. Krishna, Balaram, Mother Rohini and Mother Yashoda are in the same cart. And they move. Yes, Mati.
Hare Krishna, you are upside down, Ratikeli.
I forgot where I was. Arranged, and Krishna, Balram, Mother Yashoda, and Mother Rohini, they are all in the same cart and they are moving towards Vrindavan. And on the way, because Krishna was a very small baby when he was in Gokul, he was in his baby form. So when he killed the last, not killed, when he performed his last pastime of Damodar Leela, he was hardly 3 years old. So moving to Vrindavan was his first exposure to the dense forests of that region. And as they go, he asks his mother, Balaram and Krishna are asking their mother, what is that bird? Which is that tree? So they're learning about the forest, and this is their first time in the dense jungle. And this excites them very much. So they learn what are the different fruits, what are the trees, what kind of birds and animals are present in the forest. And this is a lot of fun for them. Once they reach Vrindavan, one of the top priorities on Krishna's mind is going back into the forest. And so he approaches Nanda Baba with his proposal, which is to allow him to start herding cows now. So, because Krishna belongs to the Vaishya community, which is primarily engaged in cow protection, agriculture, and allied business activities, it was very natural for Krishna to, you know, enter into that profession. But because of their natural affection, Nanda Maharaj and Yashodamai were very hesitant, especially Yashodamai. She very vehemently opposes this plan. She says, "You're too small, you're still having my breast milk. How can I let you go into the forest? Still my baby." So, anyway, as always, Krishna gets his way. So, in that way, Krishna finally accomplishes his desire to frolic in the forests. So we read from the Acharya's purports that till now it was a predominance of Vatsalya Rasa pastimes, where Krishna's pastimes with Yashodamai were dominant. Now that they have moved to Vrindavan, the Sakhi Rasa pastimes have begun to intensify. So his relationships with his friends have become more prominent. So this pastime, I have different accounts. So it's somewhere between uh, 4 and 6 years of age that this pastime of Krishna's herding begins. Now, because he's a small child, Nanda Maharaj does not immediately allow him to take care of the cows. Instead, he gives them the calves first. That's like an apprentice training. Once you can deal with the calves, then you can successfully handle the cows. So Krishna is very happy and he has all his paraphernalia. He has his little cow horn, his bugle, his flute, and his umbrella. He is. It seems he rejected his umbrella and shoes because he felt unless the cows have them, I shouldn't be having them. So in this way, Krishna was ready for his new role as a calf herd, and he and Balaram set out into the forest. Initially, on his first day, just like most parents do, Nanda and Yashoda accompany him to teach him the tricks of the trade. So he is simultaneously, you know, flooded with affection and also a little embarrassed by their presence. So it seems his friends start teasing him, and this makes him very embarrassed. And so he requests them to please return. Then they do, after getting an assurance from him that they will not venture into the dense forests and they'll come back early before it's too dark. In this way, Krishna enters the forest with his calves. And the Krishna book gives us a very beautiful description of his pastimes in the forest as he tends his calves. Mainly, their activity is, of course, tending the calves, making sure that they don't go here and there. But they also have a lot of fun. So, Krishna and all his cowherd friends, they imitate animals, they jump around, they play football and similar games using fruits, which are of corresponding size. And then they're running up and down, they're playing their instruments, they're playing their all kinds of games, they're playing in the water, and they're enjoying lunch together. So all these very beautiful pastimes have been described in the Krishna book. The Vrajavasis, meanwhile, are hankering to see Krishna again. So they're all standing on their rooftops when it's time for him to come back. And then when the dust of cloud comes, they're all exhilarated because that means Krishna is right behind. It seems Krishna was only slightly taller than the calves, so he wasn't very clearly visible. But as he comes, as the dust storm comes, everyone knows, okay, Krishna is coming. So in this way, their meditation was constantly about what Krishna must be doing now. Oh, the sun is so bright, he must be tormented by the light. Oh, it's raining, maybe the clouds are doing this to cool him. And again in the evening, they're just eagerly waiting for him to come home. This is how Krishna was enjoying himself as a apprentice cowherd. And it was during this time, very beautiful, peaceful time, that the demon in question appears. So Vatsasura comes in this very unassuming, uh, very form who would not stand out in the scheme of things. So he comes as a calf. That is why he is known as Vatsasura. So Vatsasura one day comes into the middle of the herd, just like one of the calves. And he gels so seamlessly into the group that the other calves also do not recognize him. Now, it is very peculiar that the calves didn't recognize him, because usually when the animals sense a foreign entity, they immediately are on the guard and they keep their distance. It seems in the Ramayana, when Sita Devi is bewitched by Marichi, the demon who appears in the form of the deer, Maricha. So in the Maricha deer comes over, he's very overly dressed. So I heard this in Chaitanya Charan Prabhu's class. He was saying this demon was dressed over the top, not like a normal demon. He didn't just come as a normal little deer. He came as a very gorgeous deer. It was a little too much overdressed. So Sita Devi was very much attracted to the deer, but Lakshmana noticed and he told her, it seems, this deer doesn't seem to belong to the 84 lakh species. If you can see, all the other animals and birds are keeping a distance from him. So definitely he's not a deer. This is some demon in disguise. But Sita Devi says, you're just too paranoid, nothing like that. Then we know what happens after that. So anyway, Maricha felt this disguise. At least Balaram could easily identify him in his form as Lakshmana. Here in the Vatsasura Leela, I mean the animals also could easily identify him, but here in the Vatsasura Leela, he was very well camouflaged in the calf community. They didn't realize he's someone who is not one of them. But Krishna recognized him. So Krishna realized that this calf is different from the calves we have. Of course, he is all-knowing, all-pervading. But Krishna's relationship with his calves was very thick. So he knew all the calves by name and obviously, but he had a very close relationship with them. The calves would run away and he would call them by name, and they would come back just to hear him, calling them. Very sweet voices, a voice he would call them back. So Krishna could very easily identify that this calf was not part of the herd. And he immediately alerts Balaram. He says, this calf looks a little out of place. What do you think? So Balaram also agrees that, yeah, this isn't one of ours. So they realize that this calf is a demon. And the calf is looking at Krishna for an opportunity to get him alone. Krishna and Balaram are looking at the demon to get him alone so that the other calves don't get scared. So in this way, very slyly, Krishna approaches the calf from behind, and immediately Vatsasura lifts his hind legs and attacks Krishna on his shoulders, hits him on his shoulders. And what Krishna does is he catches the calf demon, and in one of his favorite styles of demon killing, he starts twirling this demon all around, all over his, over his head with his hand, and throws him into the tops of the Kapitha trees. Because the trees are hit by the impact, the fruits start falling down, and several other trees also fall. Because while the demon was a calf, while on ground, when Krishna started whirling him, his true form was revealed, and he becomes the huge, very ugly demon that he actually was. And then he goes flying, and then there is a nice feast for the cowherds and the calf herds and the calves. The demigods who are watching this start showering flowers on the Lord. Now, this is something I read in the Narayaniam. It seems when the flowers start raining upon the boys, the cowherd boys, they ask, what is going on? Where are these flowers coming from? And Krishna says, oh, that's nothing. I just threw the demon onto the tree, right? So when I did that, by that impact, all the flowers, went up into the sky. And now slowly they are showering back. So in this way, he just, changed the subject. So this is how Krishna enjoyed his pastimes in his role as a calf herd. Later on, we know during the festival of Gopashtami, he is given official charge of the cows. And then there are several other pastimes associated with that. So this is the pastime of Vatsasura's killing. This is the first demon that Krishna and Balaram have to deal with after they move to their new home in Vrindavan. Now, as devotees, we have a different thing to understand from Vatsasura's killing. But before that, let me tell you about the past life of Vatsasura. Vatsasura was in his previous life a demon named Pramila, who was the son of a demon named Muru, son of the Muru demon. Once after defeating the demigods, the demon Pramila is very much intoxicated with pride, and he goes to Vasishtha Muni's ashram. While he's there, he sees that Vasishtha has a beautiful Kamadhenu cow named Nandini. And immediately he desires to possess this cow for himself. Now he knows that if he approaches Vasishtha directly, he's not going to get the cow. So he disguises himself as a Brahmana. He disguises himself as a Brahmana, and he approaches Vasishtha and seeks Nandini as charity. Because when a Brahmana seeks charity from another Brahmana, he will happily give him, knowing that the cow, when he seeks cow as charity, he knows that he will use the cow well, not harm him, not harm her or mistreat her. But Asuras will not treat the calf or the cow like that, and he is not going to get it if he goes in his true form. And so he goes in disguise to get the cow, Kamadhenu, and Vasishtha, by dint of his spiritual power, he clearly understands who this personality is. But because he is contemplating what to do, he remains silent. But Nandini is infuriated. Nandini also recognizes that this is not a Brahmana, this is definitely a demon. So she says, no, what is this? You are dressed as a Brahmana and you are seeking me as charity? I curse you to fall down. You will be born as a calf, a demon calf, in the material world. Now, this makes, not in the material world on earth, because obviously they are all in the material world. So Pramila is very much upset by this. So even he did not want to be born on earth, even being a demon. So he asked Vasishtha to please liberate him from the curse, to help him somehow. Nandini takes pity on him and she says, okay, you will be born during Treta Yuga, when the Supreme Lord will be, you'll be born during Dwapar Yuga, and the Supreme Lord will be enacting his pastimes as um, a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. And during that time, you will become part of the herd of cows that he tends. And by his mercy, you will be liberated. So Vatsasura later became, upon being born on earth, he becomes a member of Kamsa's assembly. And influenced by his fellow demon friends, he decides that he must take this service of trying to kill Krishna in the form of a calf. And then the whole pastime unfolds. And finally, Vatsasura, after his killing, attains the Sayujya liberation, which is impersonal liberation or merging into the Brahmajyoti. Because he was killed by Krishna, he is saved from repeated birth and death, at least temporarily. But because he is not a devotee, he attains the Sayujya form of liberation, whereby you do not have a personal relationship with the Lord, but you are existing in the effulgence of his personality. So this is the story of Vatsasura, how he came to be. Our acharyas have given us deeper insights into these pastimes. While I'm not very qualified to speak on them, I will attempt to repeat what I have read and pray that something that I speak is of benefit to the community and all of you. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur tells us that there are two kinds of pastimes that the Lord engages in. One is the Ashtakaliya Leela, the eightfold pastimes that unfold throughout the day and which happen both in Goloka as well as in Bhauma Vrindavan. Bhauma Vrindavan is Vrindavan on earth. So in the spiritual world also these Ashtakaliya Leelas take place. But in the material world, there is another category of Leelas which take place, and these are called the Naimittika or occasional pastimes. The Naimittika Leelas are not regularly occurring. They occur once in a while and they occur only during Krishna's pastimes in the material world. So these pastimes, and these include Krishna's coming and going from Vraja. Now, we know Krishna doesn't leave Vrindavan. He never does. But this pastime takes place when he's in Bhauma Vrindavan, that he leaves Vraja. That is one thing that happens occasionally. Another category of things is how these different demons attack, or the Nalakuvara Manigriva pastime. All of these do not happen in the spiritual world, they happen only in the material world. So each of these offenses, each of these pastimes, the Naimittika pastimes, have lessons to teach us, aspiring devotees, sadhakas, on the obstacles that are to be overcome on our path to pure devotional service. Over these past few days and going forward, we will be listening. We have been listening to and we will be listening to all these pastimes which aim to engage us in the process of purification from these anarthas or obstacles. So anartha nivritti, there are two kinds of anarthas. Some can be destroyed only by Krishna's mercy. Some can be overcome only by Krishna's mercy. And Vatsasura is one of those who can be overcome only by Krishna's mercy. There are some others, and those are represented by the demons that Balaram killed. The demons killed by Balaram require very specific endeavor from the sadhaka side, and that is how they can be destroyed. But for these demons which Krishna killed, we need Krishna's mercy to overcome them. Otherwise, it is impossible. So Vatsasura demon is one of those, and he represents the anartha as follows: childish mentality and greediness caused by a wicked kind, which causes a wicked kind of mischievousness. So, can we go to the poster, Mataji? So here we can see childish type of mentality, a type of greediness, and a wicked type of mischievousness. So now we'll look at each of these anarthas or detrimental qualities that a sadhaka may possess. I'll speak about them briefly and then I'll describe what I understood. So in the Krishna Samhita, it is said, Krishna Samhita is a book written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he describes the pastimes of the Lord. And one of the things he describes is the different obstacles to devotional service. There are 18 specifically, and when we include the Brahma Vimohana Leela and the killing, the deliverance of Nalakora and Manigriva, there are 20 in total. So one of the 18 is Vatsasura. Krishna Samhita describes the anartha as trying to enjoy body and senses, perhaps in the guise of Krishna consciousness. The living entities are sober by nature, but when they are disturbed due to possessing a body made of blood and flesh, it is called Bala Dosha or juvenile offenses. This is the fourth obstacle in the form of Vatsasura. The Chaitanya Shikshamrita, again written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describes the anarthas as being immaturity, greed, and bad association. Vatsasura, the demon who assumed the form of a calf, represents performing sinful activities out of an immature mind under the control of greed and the bad influence of evil company. By the mercy of Krishna, this fault is vanquished. Now, a third source which we have is a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who used to regularly write for the Harmonist and who is a very highly academically placed personality. So he describes the anartha as offending the spiritual master. Childish mentality he describes as offending the spiritual master or the parent. The fourth obstacle on the path is termed juvenile offense. Persons who are indifferent to the spiritual guide are thereby rendered subject to the inconsistencies and frailties that beset naughty children. This enemy of the infant Krishna is known as Vatsasura. The novice must beware of the guiles of these malicious demon and try to get rid of him at an early stage. So these are the anarthas that we hear of. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has given very elaborate points about the specific attributes of the Vatsasura demon and personalities who possess his nature. So based on that and based on classes I heard by His Grace Radheshyam Prabhu, His Holiness Shivaram Swami Maharaj, His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and several other devotees, His Grace Shyamanand Prabhu. I listened to a couple of lectures and these are things I gathered from all of them, as well as notes available in the Krishna Samhita itself, and Srila Prabhupada's books. So I'll try to share what I have understood. Personally, when I read about the Vatsasura demon at first, it gave me a lot of room to think about how much I could relate to this particular demon and the anartha he represents. But as I read more and more, I could see that there was application not just to myself, but also to our roles as devotee caregivers. I try to mentor some youth also in Krishna consciousness. So these points were very relevant to me in terms of guiding them. And now as I prepare to take on my new role as a parent, I'm also able to relate very much to what the acharyas are speaking about, specifically about this anartha. So there are many takeaways we can get from this particular pastime. So I'll try to discuss them. Now, when we speak about how Vatsasura represents different offenses, different anarthas, One of them is how he shows the tendency to enjoy body and senses, perhaps in the guise of Krishna consciousness. Now, this is very similar to, or rather, this is a very strong characteristic of the Kanishta Adhikari. So, this is something we can apply to our own personal sadhana, something we can examine in ourselves. If we have the tendency to do that, when externally we are showing ourselves as devotees, but internally we are still demoniac in our nature, that is when we start judging devotees, we start taking superior guidance for granted, just like a teenage child. So that is why this is called Bala Dosha. So when we see how when children grow to a certain age, we would have probably gone through it ourselves. Suddenly we are exposed to this new world. We have so much independence. Now we have control over whom we speak. People take us seriously. So that kind of gets to your head. And you are also very much influenced by your friends. These become primary characteristics when we are entering into teenage. This is called Baladosha because it is a very immature stage. Now, when we are devotees, also, we have this Baladosha tendency. Baladosha, we may be quite old by age, but in our spiritual practice, we are still juveniles. So, juvenile offenses is when, due to immaturity, we represent religion outside, but inside we are still the demon. Now, it is quite possible that others will not recognize this, but Krishna will, just like he identified Vatsasura from the herd of calves. And if you look at Vatsasura, he chose the most unassuming form. He also chose a very respectable form. He dressed himself up as the child, the innocent child of the representative of religion. This is the bull. One second. Yeah. So, despite all this, Krishna did identify him, and in this way, he was destroyed. From the Chaitanya Shikshamrita, we hear about how Vatsasura represents immaturity, greed, and bad association. So, greed, as we know, is something that is very commonly described as an anartha in Krishna consciousness. One of the things that we need to overcome. In fact, it is said that before Krishna killed Vatsasura, the pastime of Nalakuvara and Manigriva describes how Krishna destroyed the anartha of pride and vanity. Now, unless pride and vanity are destroyed, it is not possible for the devotee to actually actively start working on destroying these two anarthas, which are lobha, greed, and kama, or lust. So Vatsasura represents these two, lust which comes out of greed, and what we understand from that is when we are extremely greedy, sometimes we give our conscience or the good sense within us a silent ear. We do not give it a ear, and so slowly dies out, or becomes the voice of the conscience dies out. We become extremely insensitive to our own blatant problems. We start thinking it's okay. That's very dangerous. uh, Greed leads us to those kinds of inclinations. Just like Vatsasura, out of his greed for Nandini, chose to disguise himself. He did something very bad. He deceived a Brahmana in the disguise of another Brahmana. So such things start coming up when there is excessive greed. And greed comes because there is um, inherently a deep void in our heart due to absence of Krishna. When we do not have Krishna, that emptiness is what makes us extremely greedy. And because of this greed, we start doing things which we never thought we may do usually. But when that tendency comes, we need to curb it. We need to curb it and prevent sinful activities from actually from ourselves from actually engaging in such activities. Now, not just greed, but also bad association can make us do very sinful things. Falling victim to that bad association happens because of our immature mind. Right. So then the third kind of obstacle that we heard earlier was how offending the spiritual master or the parent becomes the fourth, becomes juvenile offense. So when we are, like I was saying earlier, when we first enter into teenage, we are very, we're very overconfident about our capacity, our abilities, and we start thinking, we start judging our family, our elders for the first time. So then you're becoming teens. Till then, it's all, you're just listening to what the elders say, you're good children. But when you reach teenage, that judging starts, and then all havoc breaks loose. So when you're judging, it is because you have a very immature understanding of yourself, of your own abilities. And the same tendency appears also in the neophyte devotee when he starts judging his superiors. When we first come into Krishna consciousness, or we are blessed with the association of devotees, we are so grateful for the opportunity. We are accepting and we are so eager for more. We are just in the mood of service and we're trying to get as much association as we can. But over time, that becomes a kind of familiarity. And then we become, spiritual teenagers and start thinking, oh, I know a lot. This especially happens, it seems, when we get initiated. So taking initiation as a kind of, achievement in terms of advancement, we start misusing our position and our newfound, everyone's respecting you, you're initiated devotee, you're getting a lot of services. Think, okay, maybe I am quite capable of doing things on my own. I don't need seniors anymore. So this is very similar to the teenage behavior of rebellion that comes from not hearing and chanting properly. So this kind of impulse, also there is a tendency to do frivolous things in teenage, sometimes just out of curiosity. And just because we want the thrill of that feeling, we see that many teenagers, I've also done that. We engage in things which we know are not to be done. So we feel let's see how that feels. Especially we see that in non-devotees, it's very, very common because they have grown up in a very stifled environment, possibly. They're just eagerly waiting to, first be let loose so that they can do what they want. So we see children, teenagers engaging in sinful acts simply out of idle curiosity. And if you ask them why, there's no particular reason. It's just impulsive behavior. So going under the sway of sinful activities like that is also a symptom of spiritual teenage, and known as juvenile offense. So what we can take away, personally, as a personal practice, as I was mentioning earlier, so I've divided the takeaways into 3 parts. One is as parents and caregivers, or secondly as mentors or teachers, and thirdly in our personal practice. So I'll speak about personal practice first. So greed specifically is something we need to work on at the personal level. So as I was mentioning earlier, Kuvera's sons being liberated represented the vanquishment of pride and vanity. Unless these are removed, we cannot work on overcoming lust. So a submissive disciple who has overcome these, at least is in the journey of overcoming these anarthas, slowly can, under the guidance of superiors, engage in overcoming the greed that Vatsasura represents. But when we look at our role as mentors and parents, especially mentors, so let's speak about mentors first, mentors and teachers. One thing that we need to train our wards in is mature behavior. So the neophyte devotee, he thinks he's very advanced and qualified. So sometimes our mentees are prematurely making, rash decisions, and we can see that happening in front of us. To prevent that from happening, it is essential that we create an environment of good hearing, chanting, and reading from the beginning for ourselves and for those we care for. That way, it is very less likely that we will fall for these anarthas. Also, while we are chanting or before we chant, we need to pray very sincerely to overcome these anarthas, which Krishna is responsible for. Actually, I was quite relieved to hear that Krishna has to remove this anartha. It's like, okay, at least he'll take care of that. Balarama's, Balarama's demons really make me upset because I need to work on them myself. Here, Krishna will definitely show mercy. Of course, we need to do our part, and that part is engaging in strong sadhana. The point here is that as long as we behave this way, we are still Kanishta devotees. And unless we evolve to Madhyama devotees, we cannot really contribute in any way to the preaching mission. Only those who are at least the Madhyama level to some degree can preach, are actually qualified to preach. So that's about how, as mentors to senior or like similarly aged devotees or older devotees, how it works. But when we are mentors to youth, we actually see that as parents, guardians, and well-wishers, we actually see this happening in front of us as our young innocent children kind of transform into young adults in the very big bad world, and they kind of leave our grasp. It can become frustrating, kind of demotivating. Sometimes parents become extremely agitated and upset, and they're asking, what do I do? My child has changed so much overnight. So it is natural, but it is also possible to overcome this only by, and I'm not saying this myself, these are the words of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, just let them get attached to Krishna. So this section I'm going to focus on a little bit more because it appeals to me personally. It's very relatable for me. So presently it's unfortunate, but our modern education system focuses so much on morals. Actually it doesn't. But when they say that, they want ethical workers, they want the youth to have moral values, the basis of that is very shallow. The only reason they want youth to become moral citizens is so that, there is no crime, they can control them more easily. And when they grow up, they can control them as they work in their companies, or they can, control them properly as servants of government. So that kind of shallow motivation for morality will not work. And most of the people we see around us, atheists, or they are veiled atheists, although they may not expose that specifically to us. But our teachers who teach us most things in school and college, or try to, give personality development classes, or they try to teach us moral values, they do not have Krishna as their basis. And so it's a very superficial kind of moral training that we get in school and in our education institutions. And that is now. Earlier, even that was not there. Absolutely materialistic education. So when they saw that it's not working, slowly they have started to introduce some moral values. But the only purpose for that is to make them greater sense gratifiers after they grow up, so that they become bigger consumers of consumer products, which will lead to higher economy, so that they become extremely shallow citizens who do not question the government and just go on doing whatever they are told, so that they become absolutely numb sense gratifiers who just live like animals and die like animals and in the process create a lot of money for the people who are employing them. So this kind of moral training has been highly, um, it is not at all promoted, or rather it is being decried by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. These are actually the original principles of brahmacharya. What we see today as ethics, this is what brahmacharis were taught. But if you teach that brahmacharya without Krishna in the center, it is simply mundane moralism, mundane morality. And that is not at all something that gives depth and satisfaction to the soul. When we train our children, it is important that we not just train them in morality, we need to make them devotees. So sometimes we see that, in our, in our quest to help our children and our mentees, our youth wards, we give so much emphasis to the externals and we forget the basics, which is that they need to become strong devotees. So we want them to study well, we want them to excel, we want them to mingle with their peers, we want them to speak in public forums nicely. All that is very important to us, even more important than their basic spiritual foundation. So much so that sometimes we are a little cautious or a little careful about how much we expose our children to association. So that is not the best way to be training them. When Krishna is the basis of their morality, then that will last with them, that will stay with them throughout their lives. So as devotee parents, as devotee guardians, our primary duty is to thoroughly empower our children with Krishna consciousness and not so much with moral education, because when Krishna is in their lives, automatically all good qualities will manifest. Otherwise, if we separately teach them, you need to be confident, you need to be honest, it doesn't really have that much of an effect. And they will be more attracted to their peers. Whatever we do, we are always more attracted to our friends than our elders and our parents. So the association they get, the devotee association they get, which will affect them, may not be our association. It will have to be someone different. So this is something that kind of shook me up. I need to work on this myself. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says we need to entrust our children to pure devotees. And you cannot be that person. So that was a little, but it's something that needs to be done. So we need to make sure that our children are getting good quality association, which is free of the attachment of the relationship we have with them as parents. So, and that is why it is important to have good devotee mentors and to make sure our children are exposed to them and getting their association and getting association of good devotee friends also, who together can give them support in this path. So this is something from Srila Prabhupada's teachings of Lord Kapila. So I'll wind up with this. Vedic literatures, the Vedanta, Upanishads, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and many others should be utilized if we wish to become free from the contamination of Tamoguna and Rajoguna. The whole world is revolving due to Kama and Lobha. Kama means lusty desire, and Lobha means greed. People cannot have enough sex or money. And because of this, their hearts are filled with contaminations which have to be cleansed by hearing, repeating, and chanting. Human life is meant to get rid of anarthas, unwanted things. But where is the university or college where this science of purification is taught? The only institution is this Krishna Consciousness Society. Krishna is within the heart and the contaminations are also there, but Krishna will help us cleanse them. Nashta prayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam 1-18. We must regularly hear Srimad Bhagavatam and chant Hare Krishna. These are the two processes recommended by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Haridas Thakur was chanting 300,000 holy names a day, but we have fixed the number at 16 rounds. Nevertheless, we are so unfortunate and fallen that we cannot even perform them. We should not waste our time reading and talking nonsense, but should engage in the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, To conclude, we discussed the pastime of Vatsasura, the killing of Vatsasura, what was the context in which it took place, what was Krishna's first foray into the cowherd profession. We also read about the different anarthas that Vatsasura represents, his previous life, how each of these anarthas are relatable to us as individuals, as parents, as mentors. And finally, we discussed, now let us discuss how we can prevent this from happening. Or so, like I said earlier, we need to protect our children by giving them good association. So I was thinking about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Although his father Bhaktivinoda Thakur was such a pure devotee and an acharya in the parampara, Bhaktivinoda Thakur entrusted him to Gaurkishore Das Babaji. So that itself shows how much important it is that you maintain the parental relationship, but for spiritual guidance you need someone else to give them solid guidance. Also, I once asked Mahatma Prabhu when I was very young, we had online classes, and I asked him, how do we protect our children from bad association? So the peers are always pressurizing us to do things which we know we shouldn't be doing as devotees. So how do we prevent, we cannot always be with them. So what he said was, you can only give them discrimination, a power of discrimination. Teach them how to distinguish between right and wrong. That is what you can give them. Beyond that is completely their free will. So we can overcome this anartha, as I discussed earlier, only by Krishna's mercy. And our part is to constantly hear, chant, and read, practice strong sadhana under the guidance of senior devotees, and make sure that our children who are more vulnerable to this dosha because of the nature of their age, especially devotee children, we can protect them or insulate them by giving them Krishna from the age of 5 or even younger if possible, so that they can be well protected from these things that are likely to happen. So that I will conclude. Thank you so much, Mataji. I'm 1 minute over time. Please forgive me. If you have any questions,